further ado, let's jump in, shall we? Again, great to see some friendly people in the audience here, and current clients, past clients, as well as looks like a lot of people through the chat that this is their first one. So first of all, welcome everyone. These are very unprecedented times. These webinars, I know everyone is inundated with webinars these days, but the feedback from the over 3,200 people that have taken our webinar over the past few weeks has been incredibly positive, appreciative, as we're really just continually sharing what we're seeing from the negotiations, from the tenant-landlord relationship. And now we're seeing, obviously, on the cusp of different markets that are set to reopen, a lot of questions, a lot of confusion, and a lot of unknown, and quite frankly, a lot of stress. So we look forward to having a good interactive session today for this webinar. We appreciate your time, and we certainly appreciate the ability to help each and every one if possible. So the purpose of today is really based on client feedback, which is now we're moving towards phase 2. We've talked a lot about phase 1. That was the world is ending and there is no end in sight. Well, we're now seeing an end, but the end is a little murky. So we see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we're not too sure what impact that's going to have for us and our practice. And there's no shortage of people out there with opinions and others. So really the focus is just to share the concrete examples of conversations that I've had with well over 100 doctors, some of which are on this line, to share what's working, what's not, what we're seeing from landlords, and how we can properly structure these moving forward. So how do we help to negotiate and renegotiate the lease and deal with the landlord as it pertains to reopening post-COVID-19? So on the positive, it's great that we're getting to this point. On the concerning part is, what does that look like? What does the practice look like? How do I schedule? What do I communicate with the team? Now that PPE loans and other payroll loans are coming through, what's eligibility? What changes am I going to have to make to the space, right? Am I going to have to make changes to the HVAC? I was on the phone with a group in Arizona late last night, and what's the requirement? What can we do, and what can we do to advertise some of the ways we're doing to keep our patients safe? So we're going to touch on a bunch of different strategies and how we can assist and what we're seeing throughout all of North America. Looks like 1/3 of the attendees are coming from Canada, 2/3 from the US. So we'll share some examples on both sides of the border. And if there's specific questions about specific regulations, put those into the Q&A, and we can certainly cover some of those one-offs. Or again, in appreciation of your time, there will be the ability to request a complimentary consultation call to go through your specific situation and lease so we can move forward. My name is Eric Pook, Managing Director here at Cirrus Consulting Group. It has been an honor speaking to morning, noon, and night, Saturday, Sundays, and otherwise to help support many of you in the dental community on the whole. And definitely we've seen some pretty heart-wrenching situations where landlords are holding doctors in default and really doing some pretty awful things, in my opinion, that is concerning not only now, but also down the line. Let that be defaults, let that be not putting things in writing, and really leaving the tenant very exposed. And very interesting, right? We're seeing a lot of prominent J. Crew and others file for bankruptcy. Landlords now, for the most part, are entering into a very uncharted land where those that are heavily leveraged and the smaller mom and pops especially are in a very difficult situation, especially as many of the tenants have not paid rent and put themselves in the mercy of the landlord. On the bright side, the dental community is seeming to have a very warm response from landlords now that are realizing, who are my core tenants that can't work from home? And dental tenants are the best, in my opinion, throughout the globe, the best tenants with the lowest possible default rates, the highest amount of construction costs and tenant improvements, and also, right, principally bringing in fantastic foot traffic, and are some of the most likely to have paid all rents and all obligations, and are now in the stage of of improving those leases. So we've had a lot of great conversations with expansions, as well as how can we make some specific alterations. And many of you I know are looking at the positive glass half full and saying, how can I take advantage of this situation to minimize my short-term cash flow and help protect myself from a capital preservation exercise in terms of deferments, referrals, or renegotiating rents and the full lease. And we've seen, really some unprecedented positive response from landlords, very anxious to be securing new leases and renegotiating these times to help their own financials. So let's jump in, shall we? Again, feel free through the question and answer section to post as we go. For those of you that it is your first time, welcome. Cirrus, very uniquely, we are the only healthcare specialized tenant representation firm of our kind in North America, principally just focusing on the dental community. And it's unique. We were founded by doctors, for doctors, 25 years ago, specifically with the goal to how can we help the dental community not be taken advantage of, properly negotiating or renegotiating their lease agreements, and make sure that they're leveraging the fact that you all have signed agreements which can represent $1, $2, $3 million of total payments over the foreseeable life of the practice. So are we getting the value for that? We've done over 12,000 successful negotiations. We're unique, right? We have our own in-house legal, leasing, consulting departments. We've also hired those that used to work for the national landlords. So those that used to negotiate against dentists, we've now hired them on board, so they're representing the dentist. So it's a great inside perspective that we know exactly how to strategize, plan, and communicate so that we can advocate properly, specifically for the dentist. And we're not brokers, right? We are always paid directly by our clients, therefore we know we're always working in your best interests. And unlike others, that the more you pay in rent, the more gets paid in commissions. We think that that's an inherent difference in terms of how we can support our clients. We do lots of these continuing education courses, specifically to make sure that, again, we're educating on the business side of dentistry and how can we help to protect ourselves. And again, I keep referencing this. It seems like yesterday I was in the Javits Center in New York at the booth, and now it's still a triage center. So this is one way to continually sort of start the conversation, because these are some pretty eye-opening stats. And even through COVID, having received well over 1,000 leases over the past few weeks, this still remains the same. 85% of dentists right now have the lease that can prevent them from ever selling their practice through the assignment clause. 54%, and lately we've seen even more so, especially with the market starting to shift, that 54% of dentists across North America are overpaying in rent for their practice. And over 80% of the people we've spoken to, and landlords structure the lease to give them a percentage of the practice sale proceeds when the lease is, and when the practice is sold and the lease is transferred, which, as many of you know who have sold your practices in the past, you cannot without the prior written consent of the landlord. So how that is structured, for the most part, is entirely landlord friendly. And landlords are realizing that one of the largest transfers of wealth in relation to their building is the sale of the dental practice, which, in the past, which we'll touch on today, the purchase and sale, but, it can go for millions of dollars, and it's hinging on their ability to approve or not approve the lease. So again, let's jump in, because we've got a lot of great content and a lot of great questions starting to come through. So first and foremost, the purpose of today is, okay, I'm going to be reopening. We see the light at the end of the tunnel. Now what? What is the lease? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my practice? What changes am I going to have to make? Am I going to have to make capital expenditures as we see provinces and states starting to reopen? Right? What am I going to need to do to make sure that I'm aligning with the specific state or provincial guidelines? And what impact does that have to the lease? Do I have to get written consent from the landlord? Do I need to have, what impact does that have if I have to spend $10,000, $20,000, or $30,000 for improvements? What leverage do I now have with the landlord? And when should I make those expenditures? And is there a way that the landlord can help? So we're going to start with some national updates, talking about what's working, what's not, and what we're seeing throughout in terms of rent deferments, abatements. We'll touch on some of the key aspects, which is the most positive feedback from those that have attended in the past, is what are some elements to look out for now that we're preparing to move forward. For those of you that are on the line, I would encourage you to pull up a digital copy of your lease and follow along. I think you might find that to be a very rewarding and or not rewarding experience to realize what we have in essence committed to. In addition, we'll touch on practice acquisitions and exits. We're certainly seeing a lot of a feedback now as it pertains to practice acquisitions and exits. Can I walk away? Can I sell? And if so, what works for me? So we'll touch on some of that. If I could walk away, should I or could I? How do I structure the lease post COVID-19, which we're getting a lot of questions on, specifically for new starts, which we've had another 2 clients retain us just over the past day in terms of helping them move forward with some of the new developments, as well as renewals. In addition to that, again, what to look out for specifically through the process of the full lease negotiations, and also sharing some landlord negotiation strategies. And we'll go through some of that Q&A. And again, as tenants, you have leverage. I cannot stress enough. Each and every day, we are seeing examples where landlords are recognizing, with the proper education, landlords are seeing that, yes, they want to protect their principal tenants. And yes, there is leverage. You are signing a long-term lease, or you're about to renew a long-term lease, or you've been a perfect tenant that you've paid rent on time each and every month. So for some of those in the question section, yes, there is leverage, and we prove that every single day in terms of getting wins and improvements and renegotiating rents that our legal leasing team is doing every day. National updates. So let's jump in for this. So this is interesting. So US and Canada, typically, what we've seen is for probably 30% of the doctors that have requested a rent abatement or deferrals or otherwise are getting the knee-jerk reaction from the landlord that says, right, great, send me all your financials and your firstborn child. Meaning, I want to see your tax returns from this year and last year, IRS, CRA, etc. I want to see that for your personal and your corporation. I also want to see your bank statements, your Chase private client account. I want to see anything and everything across the board. So our candid conversations with some of the landlords after the fact, they are very clear. They have no intent or resources to look and go through financials. But it's a great strategy on behalf of the landlords to take the list of people that have asked for rent abatements or deferrals from 300 to 150, right? That people are just, oh, you know what, forget it, I'll just keep going. I don't want them to see that information. For the most part, again, that is either something just to delay or to reduce the total number of requests. So again, very interesting from that perspective. Hopefully, though, if you've had your lease professionally negotiated, there should not be a responsibility to provide some of those financials. So determine in the lease if it is a responsibility of yours or not. If not, there's nothing precluding you from still having the conversation. Don't get discouraged. We've had great success with both the rent deferrals and rent abatements. So let's touch on rent deferrals. Very common that most landlords are open to the fact that, yes, we're closed with the exception of emergency patients and we need some short-term help. Very reasonable and a very high success rate we're seeing with proposing a new lease amendment and documenting a deferral of at least 2 or 3 months, which is then spread out over the next 6 or 12 plus months in a no interest basis so that we're relieving our cash crunch in the short term. So if you have concerns over cash in the short term, again, typically we've consistently found that our team has done a great job in helping to redirect, defer, or get abatements in terms of relieving ourselves from the short-term cash crunch. Landlords are getting incentives. One of our attorneys did a great job leveraging and helping to do some lobbying for the CECRA, which is a Canadian legislation now, which is, offering some specific subsidies. But again, what we've found is our services are needed more than ever, because the question is the landlord going to pass that on or not? So lots of ways of looking through that. So that's on the deferrals. Interestingly, another strategy that's worked well is the security deposits. So we've found a way to basically, in lieu of May rent or June rent, apply the security deposit. That's a win-win. It gives the landlord the ability to recognize that 1 month worth of revenue. At the same time, it frees us up from not having to take that out of our bank account. So a lot of strategies that we've done recently to find creative ways to free up cash and also to help make sure that we've minimized some of our cash obligations as we prepare to reopen. But be clear, nothing, even if you've paid April and May, it doesn't preclude you from renegotiating a June, July, and August, right? And still relieving some of those cash as you're bringing back on your staff, as they're coming off of EI or UI, et cetera, right? So again, just because you haven't had a good negotiation result thus now doesn't mean we give up and roll over and we go back to work without getting help. Rent abatements, we've seen some good successes, especially those that have a lease coming due in the next 2 or 2.5 years. That is typically music and money to the landlord's ears. So we found a lot of success with looking at renewals, and by proposing a new long-term lease renewal, in some cases, landlords are open to tenant improvement allowance, specifically now for some money in the short term to help with some of the build out or changes or infectious control type things. Or we've also seen some free rent. File we were involved with, I saw the other day, that was got over 3 months of free rent, April, May, and June, in exchange of a new 10-year term. So there's lots of different ways that, again, the landlords have a budget or have an amount of money that can potentially be used to help you and their key tenants in the short term. So that's a quick update for rent deferrals and abatements. So another key piece that I can't stress enough is, great, my landlord said, or my property manager said, don't worry about May, or give me half and pay me what you can and we'll figure it out later. So that again is a problem. If any of you have got an offer or a proposal or something, and especially if it's not come from the landlord, asset manager, or the landlord's attorneys, and it's not in the form of a proper lease amending agreement, that is a problem, because the lease does not say that you're hereby relieved of April rent if the property manager, in passing in the hallway or through a text message, said, pay me what you can. So very important that anything that you are getting relief or details from the landlord, make sure it is properly amended, because if not, again, in 2 months, 3 months, 6 months from now, what impact is that going to have? Are you in default? What impact does that have? We'll touch on some specific examples here shortly. But definitely make sure that if your landlord's agreed to anything, get it properly documented, and it should be and needs to be properly amended in a lease amending agreement. So everything is above board and very, very clear and agreed upon, and the contract has been altered to allow for that creative payment plan, which we've been heavily involved with lately. Post COVID-19 alterations, I mentioned that a little bit before. So this again is key. Strategically, a lot of people said, you know what, I'm just going to renew, or I'm just going to keep going, or I'm going to go month to month, and I'm going to, I guess, have to pay whatever I'm required to pay to help shift and add some separation walls and add some other specific plexiglass to separate, or I'm going to have to make some changes to the HVAC, or I'm going to have to add an HVAC with a separated HEPA filter and blower. What does that mean? So for any of these things, for the most part, you're going to need the landlord's prior written approval. So within your lease, look at the alteration section. Do you have the ability to make changes to the space? And for the most part, you do not, without prior written consent of the landlord, or you're in default of the lease. Secondarily is, if you're about to make any significant expenditures, look at the lease first. If your lease is coming due, especially in the next 2 or 3 years, that's music to the landlord's ears, that you're spending more money on their building, right? And when it comes time to renew, right, what are they going to do? They're going to say, great, well, I'm glad you spent the 50 grand. and here's your new lease terms. They know you're not going anywhere because you've just had to make these expenditures. So much better off if you're having to make any improvements as it relates to COVID-19 or otherwise. Best to have those conversations early with the landlord. I don't feel comfortable spending tens of thousands of dollars for improvements if my lease is in a poor state or based on the financials I'm being asked to pay for. So again, you do have incredible leverage, especially that you're making more investments into the space, which you're required to do, right, in order to reopen. And therefore, yes, very important that we focus that. And then again, as mentioned all the way through, of the, just the dozens and dozens and dozens of doctors that have retained us in the past few weeks alone, we're seeing an unprecedented, great positive response from landlords for the most part in terms of entering into the renewal negotiations. And then of course, for new starts, landlords now are really in our 26-year history. We've never seen landlords more open to changes, enthusiastic to get deals done and fill those vacant boxes because they're nervous for the future, and they have made specific commitments to their shareholders and stakeholders and banks, and they're very anxious to securing deals. So that's a quick update from that perspective. So this again is a key section that now, as we're looking forward, what do I need to do prior to reopening? So the first off is dust off a copy of that lease. Before we get back into the saddle full time, let's look at the lease. First of all, when does your lease expire? Your leverage hinges as to if your lease expires in 1 year versus 10 years is a very different leverage to the landlord. Don't forget, they care about term and rent. So if you don't have much term left, that means they don't have much revenue they can recognize. So they're very anxious to be securing long-term leases. It only benefits them financially. And that's good news. They can go back to their banks and otherwise. Are there options to renew? Right, which is another great conversation. Are those options transferable if you are to sell your practice? Many of the leases I've reviewed lately are not transferable, meaning if you're in year 8 of a 10-year lease and you have 2 5-year options, for many of you, those options are only good for you. If you're looking to sell to a family member, to a daughter, to a son, or to an outside entity or to your associates, per the lease, they are not able to benefit from that transfer. Those options are only good for you personally or your professional corporation. Another major one is the lease. Is it in your name personally or your corporation? I've reviewed a few leases, unfortunately, that it's without even them realizing it, the broker had put the lease in their name personally, not their corporation. And therefore, in the event of a dispute now, the landlord, it's yourself and personal assets, which are now put on the line and served in the form of a personal guarantee or jointly and severally liable. Or I've seen some even linking personally the brother and sister-in-law, which is, again, unbelievable, especially now, especially if there's been an issue with rent payments. So a couple of core components here are also the monthly financial obligations. Again, our guidance is on behalf of all, and I can't be more clear on this, right? Hopefully everyone has made April and May's rent payments. Very important, not only from a leverage situation, but if you have not received a lease amendment, if you have not received any confirmation from the landlord and you have missed that payment, then that is a problem and can be a big problem when we come to reopen if the landlord has found us in default. And if they have or have not, we've received, unfortunately, dozens of letters of landlords that even early on in COVID have found their tenants in default because they have not opened or been continuously open per the lease agreement, which required them to do so. So again, if I can't be more clear, make April, make May if you can, and if not, very important you get something structured and documented for both of those. So understanding what those obligations are, what are the common area maintenance. If you're not sure, I included the link at the bottom, info@cirrusconsultinggroup.com. Strongly suggest you send us a copy of the lease. We're happy to schedule a complimentary consultation and review. This has really been top of mind, default. So what does that even mean, and what impact does that have for a business? So default is anything that you have contractually committed to, either yourself personally or your corporation. And if for any reason you have not fulfilled your obligations, such as paying rent in a timely manner, then you can be held in default. And many of you, if you have not paid April or rent, again, there's terrible guidance going through some of the dental chats and Facebook groups about, oh, just don't pay. I had a doctor tell me the other day that their friend in residential real estate said, oh yeah, you can get better leverage if you just, don't pay your rent. No, no, unequivocally no. This is not a loan mod or residential refi. This is a commercial real estate agreement, of which is between two entities and two businesses, and no, that is not the case. Very clearly, it will state that if you are in default, you may lose the ability to exercise your options and stay in the space. You may be subject to termination rights from the landlord. You may go through a whole host of other aspects. You might lose the ability to sell the practice in terms of if the alterations or the ability to assign and sublet the practice is dedicated on you not have been in default at any time. And in some cases, the landlord doesn't even have to notify you that you're in default. And if so, look through your lease. Is there a cure or a remedy period specific to that? General terms and conditions, again, in the essence of time at a high level, key things to look at if you're following your lease now, look to see if there is a personal guarantee. For those of you that, have said this is an incredibly difficult time, you know what, I just want to walk away and throw the keys in the ocean. Be careful, right? There's, first of all, a lot of value for what you've built and created in your practice, and the landlords are there. The landlord doesn't want to see you go. Let's be clear, right? They need your rental income. They don't want to have a vacant space, so you have ability to negotiate. But if there's a personal guarantee, the landlord has a whole extra pound of flesh to come after yourself for your personal assets. Exclusivity, right? If you are in default, you lose that exclusivity. A lot of questions about if my landlord goes bankrupt, what happens? Hopefully in your lease, you have a subordination non-disturbance agreement, which allows your lease to be subordinate to the mortgage, and therefore it protects your lease, and you should have a quiet enjoyment clause through there. Also, look through your assignment and subletting. Can you transfer the practice? If so, whom can you transfer the practice to? And how much control does the landlord have? Okay, so let's jump into phase 2 of the webinar today, which we're having a lot of questions on. So I wanted to add a specific sections here to practice acquisitions and exits. Again, was on the phone with a growing group last night that has 2 locations and looking to expand dramatically throughout the southern US. We're seeing sort of 2 categories. We're seeing some doctors now towards they're already part of the end portions of their career. They had put their practice up for sale and they were contemplating transition. So there's sort of 2 categories. There are the dentists out there today that are in a must sell or I must walk away situation. So, first of all, again, the walk away, it might not be that easy. In many cases, in many of the leases I've reviewed, there's a requirement to remove all the leasehold improvements that you've made or that have been made in the space. So you might have a demolition, meaning you have to restore the practice and surrender it in pre-dental condition, removing some of those medical grade plumbing and electrical, etc. So again, it might not be that easy. And again, in a must sell situation, that's obviously going to affect some of the prices. Now, for the most part, again, right, we've saved, we have some reserves, and you know what, we're able to weather the storm. And for those, the fundamentals of the business remain. We will get back to a sense of normalcy. And, therefore now it's about, the issue is, what does my lease, and if I do decide to sell in 6 months or a year or 2 years from now and I'm delayed, then how is my lease going to allow for that? If your lease is coming up and you're thinking, oh good, my lease is about to terminate in 6 months or a year from now, I can just sell and walk away. You've now left yourself in a very precarious situation, because think about it from the landlord's perspective or the lender's situation. If you do not have sufficient term on your lease, then the new doctor and the new doctor's lender, that's a red flag. meaning that if you only have 1 year left on your lease or 2 years left on the lease and your options are not transferable, or that's it, that what is the new doctor able to buy? They're trying to buy your predictability and continuity of revenue, that after they buy this from you, they need to make sure that, right, they can pay their bills and that the revenue is going to continue. That's the risk they're taking. So part and partial, typically the longer the term of the lease, the more predictability and continuity that is benefiting your buyer. So again, very important, if you're coming up to transitioning, the lease can be paramount. And if you're on a month-to-month basis, why should the landlord, really do anything? The landlord could directly engage with your buyer and completely cut you out of the deal. And that obviously, what's your practice worth without the location? So very important, we're structuring that. Let's touch on financial modeling for a second. So 2 sections here. So a lot of questions now are specifically with, what's my practice worth now post-COVID? And from a financially modeling situation, this is a challenge. Think about it. How are we going to look back at 2020 and say, what's that practice worth? What percentage and coefficient variables are we going to look at to say, how do we look at the massive decrease in production, and how do we protect and project future modeling? It's very different and difficult. Owner occupied is another big one. So for those of you, again, that are on the line that of a few hundreds of doctors here that are joined us today, the question now is, now you own your building. So you think, okay, that's okay. I can go from one pocket to the other, and you're your own landlord. However, many of you are realizing that, I bought that commercial building or unit a few years ago at the absolute peak of the market. In some cases, it's worth less. We've signed up for a large building. We now have a mortgage obligation, plus all the other costs of the building. Plus you might have a tenant that is not paying rent. And what you thought would have been a great opportunity to not lease and to buy has now become a nightmare. And some of you are now looking to either sell the building and get that away from you and keep the practice, or transition, sell the practice, keep the building. The problem in both aspects is many of the doctors we've spoke to recently throughout the country is they don't have a lease in place, or the lease that's in place was written on the back of a napkin from their accountant on the day of closing. And it's a problem because you need it, let alone tax or liability, more so to clearly delineate who pays for what. What does my building pay for, right? And what does my practice corporation pay for? And if it's all melded or there isn't any documentation, again, that's a major issue that, as it pertains to acquisition and exits, can dramatically impact the value. And also, again, to the point earlier, what's your plan, right? What impact does this have to your plan? And how much control does the landlord have to impact your ability to sell the practice? And again, from that perspective, if you could walk away, could you? The problem with walking away is you have value, right? There are many associates, I can ask you to post in the quick Q&A section. There's many associates on the line that are seeing this, or groups or other individual practitioners that look at this as an unbelievable opportunity to be able to avoid a few $100,000 of build out construction costs to move into a fully built out dental practice. Think about that. It's an amazing opportunity to be saving a dramatic amount of cost. So you have leverage. Even if you were to transfer your lease and sell the location, if you will, for a dollar, right? How many associates would love to just take over your lease and have a fully built out, dental practice? So don't underestimate the value to others of, you've incurred the expense to build the practice or to buy the practice. How do we help to recapture as much of that as possible on the sale? Okay, so just to continue to move forward here, a couple of core components just to summarize. Why is the lease so important? 5 major reasons. Principally, your office is the location. It is the fundamental of your business. Without the location, what do we have? So it's critical that we pay the proper attention. I get it. Sleep apnea, people are saying you got to do the sleep apnea. The business coaching, right? They've got their own set of goals and priorities. My perspective is focus on what is one of your most expensive components, and typically payroll or rent are number one, depending on your layoff situation and who you brought back on staff. And secondarily, what's one of your biggest impacts to overhead, which is rent. So being able to negotiate and protect yourself, right? There are hundreds of 5-star Google reviews that said that their investment in Cirrus and professional negotiations is one of the best returns on investment they've had ever in their practice, because it is the foundation and it is ultimately what you're selling as you're transitioning, in addition to charts and otherwise. Again, failure to pay can be catastrophic. Make sure that as you're going back to work, you've got the documentation with the landlord that agrees to whatever you've done in the past, or you've agreed to a go-forward strategy. But the landlord, once they get through all these issues and lack of payments and rents, that you're not going to get a surprise, certified mail envelope under your door 2 or 3 months after you've started. Investment or cost to build, right? Again, $200 per square foot, very common, very expensive to move. Don't let anything jeopardize that or be forced to move in a 30 or 60-day notice because you've been in default. And ultimately, again, the lease gives you leverage. Of all the tenants, think about it. Doctors right now and landlords are getting core phone calls today from bubble teas and all sorts of different tenants that have no ability to pay rent, gyms, etc. Versus think about being a landlord and getting a call from the dentist that says, look, you know what, I'm going through some tough times. I'm closed. For cash flow, I'd like some assistance for June and July, or May and June for rent. But in exchange, I'm also looking to a long-term lease and to help reset some of my financials based on current market rates. And I'd like to submit a proposal outlining some of the business clauses as well as some of the financials for extending my lease. Right? Again, if you're the landlord, how are you going to pick up the phone? Who are you going to respond to first? Whose voicemail are you going to call back? So you have, again, as a dentist, as a tenant, you are, right, have a lot more leverage and ability to help than you may believe. Additionally, what do we want the lease to do? So first and foremost, Mr. Landlord, we want fair and affordable financial terms. Notwithstanding COVID has created an unbelievable opportunity to be renegotiating, right? Landlords now are in a very unusual position, as are we all, but we've found a massive silver lining that landlords are very anxious to be securing long-term leases and renegotiating, and they've been open in many cases to many aspects that, again, we haven't seen in decades. Not really since 2008 have we seen more openness and benefits in terms of negotiations. It should have long-term stability and security. It should minimize risk and exposure. I've shared many examples of these terrible examples of the estates of doctors who have passed away via health issues or otherwise. And then that lease obligation is binding to your heirs and successors. So one of the key things to look out for in your lease, and everyone should have, is a death and disability clause. Something that is dental specific, that if you're unable to practice wet finger dentistry and properly, right, perform clinical care, then it is very important that your lease should, especially in the next renewal, it gives you, it's akin to a life insurance policy that doesn't cost you a penny. In essence, it's an early termination right. It allows you the ability to your estate or otherwise to submit a 60-day notice to the landlord to terminate the remaining rental obligations, or again, if you're not there, very important to protect yourself and the estates that you're not held in default because you, right, as the named tenant, are no longer there. You've worked too hard, you've put too much time, energy, and effort and money into this to let, you know, anything impact the value for your practice, right? Or again, a lot of issues now with, you know, if you've lower back pains, hand tremors, etc., right? Does your lease give you the ability, and if it just says permanently disabled, well, you might have a small hand tremor that might prevent you from practicing, but you might not be deemed to be permanently disabled. So it's only as good as the dental specific language that's written that, again, we've created over 26 years. All right, so here's one of the main sections, which is principally the most requested. So how do I structure my lease post COVID-19? So as you can see, we've added a few based on what we're seeing now in the field, as well as highlighting some as well. Okay, so lots of good questions here. So as you're following along in your lease, first of all, I know how painful and difficult it can be to read the lease. I personally enjoy it because it's there to help structure a long-term business plan. And as I have since the late 90s advised small business owners on how to reduce risk and increase revenues and profits, it is one of core things. So takeaways recently is doctors, look, be aware of what is critical to me to reopen. So first of all, moving forward, Eric, are you guys putting in language for pandemics and COVID specific language now that gives us termination rights in the event of a second wave or pandemic? The short answer is no. Landlords are not going to add a brand new sections of COVID that can relieve you of all obligations. It's just unlikely and not going to happen. However, there are a lot of COVID specific components that can and are and will be included, such as fixturing periods. So for those of you looking at buying or building, specifically building at a new practice, the fixturing period or the ability to terminate the lease agreement prior to being open for business. Definitely, we're seeing some good success with landlords agreeing to some COVID style abilities to either delay your obligations, extend the fixturing period, or to terminate prior to opening if in the event, again, there's unforeseeable delays. So yes, there are some good abilities through here as well. In addition, through some of the alteration section. So yes, very important to look at if you're making any changes, structurals, walls, even some basics of drilling in specific plexiglass or otherwise, that typically, depending on your lease, is not allowed without prior written consent of the landlord. Typically, we ask the landlord for the ability to be able to do $10,000 or $20,000 of an alterations amount that doesn't need landlord's approval, but definitely look through your alterations clause to ensure that, can I make changes if I want to? And if so, what requirements does the landlord have on me? For some of you, you might have to use the landlord's own specific contractors based on how your lease is structured. So that's the first three. Some other questions and ones through our chat right now is on sort of termination language. So yes, there can be the ability to put in some extra termination language, especially those that are expanding or looking to move into a new space or development. There can be some termination language that allows that if there are unforeseeable delays, that you should have an extra exit. Continuous operation, for those of you in stream with leases today, continuous operation is important because for the most part, it states that you must be open for these hours or these specific days without exception. And if the section of the lease, such as force majeure or otherwise, states that you're not relieved from the performance of the lease, the non-financial performance of the lease, then that is a problem. And we've seen many default notices that have been sent to us specifically because landlords have said, you're not open. And per section 42.3, the continuous operation clause, we've now found you in default, and here's the laundry list of terrible things we're going to do next, which can be requiring 3 months of additional security deposit paid immediately, or the acceleration of the next 3 months in rent. So these are the type of things that we have to be cautious on and have to be smart because it is happening and has happened to those on the call. In addition to that, the assignment, again, can we sell the practice? If so, what does the assignment and subletting section state? For many of you, you will be continually and in some cases personally liable. When you sell your practice, you will be continually liable. So if the new doctor defaults, they can come after you or your corporation individually and skip over the new tenant. So look out for that within your leases. That's one of the first things we do look out for. Can we bring in associates? Can we bring in 1099s or independent contractors? For the most part, right, that is a separate business entity. And without landlord's approval, the landlords could use that to increase rent or potentially hold you in default if, as you ramp up, you want to stay lean and you want to bring in some different businesses, such as an independent contractor. And if they're not on the lease and they're not an employee, then that is an issue, right? We've created the assignment clause decades ago that allows for the clarity that you can bring in independent professionals and will not be deemed subletting that space. Demolition and relocation, this is another big one, right? As the landlords, or as they change hands, or as if there's bankruptcies, new developers will be gobbling up strip malls and medical buildings at a large rate, is my personal view. And therefore, what does that mean for us? If the new landlord wants to enact or use your demolition right, how long do we have to relocate? Or if they choose the relocation right, that could be, I read one the other day, it only had 60 days notice to relocate the practice from one location to another within the building. And good news, the landlord covered 100% of the transfer costs with up to the maximum of 2 monthly base rent payments. So they would pay everything up to $8,000 to relocate your dental practice to a vacant shell, right, in the basement. That is, and could be, and would be devastating. Death and disability, we touched on before. Surrender right. Does it specifically say, as the lease I reviewed late last night, does it specifically state that you have the requirement to remove all leasehold improvements and restore the premises back to the base shell condition? And is that your responsibility? That could be tens of thousands of dollars of demolition costs that would be transferred onto your buyer. So if I was advising a buyer looking at that practice, I would say yes, right? That is now their obligation to take over that responsibility. And that's risk that is being transferred over because of the failure to negotiate that originally with the landlord. Overholding is another big one. If you are headed towards month to month, don't. Very, very likely that your base rent can increase to 100 to 200%. So again, for any of you that are on a month-to-month basis, please, there'll be a poll here shortly to request a complimentary call and lease review, or the ability to submit a form to specifically request that. Again, please mark urgent, because if you are on a month-to-month basis, you are heavily exposed, and yourself or the landlord with 30 days notice can walk away. And if you're trying to sell, that puts you in a very difficult situation because there is no term, there's no guarantee that the new tenant has. So the new tenant then negotiates with the landlord for a new lease. Well, what are they buying from you then? Charts and what? Amortized value of equipment, right? You want to give yourself the ability to stay in the space and continue to operate, especially in a sales situation. Personal guarantees we mentioned today, continuous operation, quiet enjoyments, performance of lease we touched on, subordination, exclusivity, and financial statements. Again, it is, for those of you that have joined afterwards, if the landlord, as a deflection method, has asked for financials, don't be discouraged. In many cases, they're still willing to negotiate. That's just been their process to add a delay and deferment. In many cases, they have no desire to even look at them. They're just helping to reduce the total number of their tenants that have been asking for lease abatements or deferrals. In the essence of time, I'll skip through this pretty quickly, but in essence here, this assignment, again, those contemplating transferring the lease agreement, you cannot, in the first red here, cannot sell or transfer the practice without the prior written consent of the landlord, which in many cases they can withhold or condition the consent. They might say, you know what, I want an extra 30% increase in rent in order to approve you transferring the lease. Or I saw another letter from a doctor that forwarded to us that in exchange of transferring the lease, the landlord wanted a certified check for over $100,000 just to transfer the lease agreement. Again, devastating. And even for asking, right? The landlord may have the option to either A, approve your request to transfer the lease, option 2, right, decline the tenant's request, or 3, terminate the lease upon the effective date of the proposed transfer or sublet. Meaning that just for asking to sell your practice to Dr. Smith or to your associate, the landlord can rip up the lease, terminate the lease, and now what do we have left? Right? That could obliterate, technically, 100% of the practice sale proceeds. And many, many other components down below, right, where the landlord could even be entitled to a percentage of those practice sale proceeds through the consideration clause. So what's the solution here? Well, first off, time is leverage. Don't wait, take action. Start early. 2 years prior to expiry is one of the best times to start the renegotiation process. The longer you wait, the closer you get to expiration, the less leverage you have, the less likely the landlord knows that you're not going to relocate, the more power and control they have. Start to, in many cases, 2.5, some, we've even seen landlords 3 years to say, yes, I'm happy to revisit an early renegotiation, but starting early works. Do not wait until after your option to renew deadline has. Don't wait until you're waiting for a proposal from the landlord. What's the strategy? How do we do it? We start with a proposal. So we outline a specific proposal. Don't be reactive. Be positive. Be proactive. Submit a proposal outlining the financial, business clauses, and all the specific alterations, right? Have it professionally drafted and submit that to the landlord. Now that cuts through the property manager, cuts through the gatekeeper. They now have to make the proposals to the decision makers, and we're hitting them right in the wallet. And now is a great time. So what's working? Think with them, right? What's in it for me, but also what's in it for the landlord. And term and rent is key. So again, if your lease is coming up for renewal in the next 2 or 3 years, very important we have a conversation to talk strategy and leverage and talk about what we can do to properly renegotiate that lease now. Because if you just exercise your option, you're agreeing to everything in that lease agreement that we touched on today, with the exception of rent. Oh, and by the way, rent is only going to increase because the option language stated that it's only moving in one direction and will never be less than what you're paying the last calendar month. So be proactive. Look, when does your lease expire? Do you have any abilities to remove? What money do you need to spend on your space in terms of tenant improvement allowance? What rent relief or deferral could be helpful for you financially? I had a question from a doctor the other day who stated that, geez, I'm a little concerned. I've always been a good tenant. I've always paid my rent on time. How would the landlord look at me in the event that I ask for some rent deferrals or abatements? The short answer is, there is no impact, in my opinion. You're a great tenant. These are unprecedented times. Quite frankly, the landlords are expecting it. And if they think about it, if they can give the ability to offer some deferred rent or otherwise, and they can only do it with a handful of tenants, who do you think they would want to secure first? Right? The pizza shop, the nail salon, right? Or their dental tenant. Additional rent, again, so what do we do? Take action, have it reviewed, and making sure you're aware of strategies and having a specific plan. Don't go, don't just jump back in or make changes or otherwise without knowing where your lease sits, what your obligations are, what are you committed to, and what impact the lease has to your revised transition or acquisition strategy. Again, I can't stress enough, it is an unprecedented opportunity. If there's a silver lining behind all of this craziness of COVID, is that yes, right, of the dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of doctors that we're working with in active files, we're seeing that there is a great opportunity to be renegotiating leases, to be resetting financials, and to be negotiating letters of intents or proposals or leases in a non-binding way over the next 30, 60, 90 days. And what I want to avoid everyone having is looking back in 2 or 3 or 4 months or 5 months or 12 months and saying, you know what, shoot, I only wonder what those financials would have looked like had I renegotiated with the landlord during that COVID-19 period and during the crux of when we were closed, because that could be some regret. So best is, right, we only have to contractually commit when we sign. There's lots of ways we can negotiate in a non-binding way over the next 30, 60, 90 days. So if things get worse before they get better, then we can continue to choose what makes best sense and when to lock in at the most fair and successful rates. Again, for those of you that have been contemplating or past clients and saying, geez, you know what, is it worthwhile renegotiating? Should I do it now? The short answer is depends on your situation, depends on where you're at for the practice. But for the most part, again, for those of you with a $500,000, $2 million practice, why would you jeopardize the livelihood of the practice with something like the lease? And also, why would you miss out on a good opportunity to be renegotiating? Talking to some of the senior practice management team at Bank of America or some of the major banks, RBC and otherwise, it is an unprecedented opportunity. For those of you that have been contemplating expanding or otherwise, financing rates have never been lower. Bank of Canada, the Feds in the US recently, unbelievable ability of it's as close to zero as we've ever seen. Equipment and supplies are key. And again, landlords are desperate for the most part to fill those vacancies, get revenue in, and shore up their own books. So a key piece, if any of you are wondering how much the rent should be and what is a key component, we have access to 95 billion square feet of data. We can pull up comparable lease rates, we can see market rates, basic demographics, we can see all sorts of incredible data, title searches, there's great resources we have available to you. And our strategy here is clear as it has been since the beginning. Get all the information first. If you don't have a digital copy of your lease, email the landlord and say, based on PPP or other sort of incentives, please send me a digital copy. They'll typically get it back to you within the hour. Most of the time it's needed for some of those loan applications. Then identify your goals, right? When do you want to transition? What's the abilities? Let's go through looking for risks. Let's get all the number 4, prepare with the market research. And number 5, determine the negotiation carefully choreographed game of chess first, right? And then what have we not done? We have not yet picked up the phone and reached out to the landlord. And what unfortunately most doctors do is wait until the 11th hour and then pick up the phone and call the landlord and skip sections 1 through 5. And landlords love that because, right, they have complete control. At that point, we negotiate financials, all the specific business terms, and we don't stop until we get to a final form lease agreement. That's how, now more than ever, is a key strategy to win. So as we wrap up here, again, we're going to spend some time, happy to stay on afterwards with lots of Q&A, but definitely for those of you on the line, I strongly suggest filling out the poll here. We're going to pull up momentarily. We will set up a complimentary lease review. We'll spend some time doing the due diligence, right? Scheduling an hour-long consultation, and the questionnaire has just popped up. So please, number 1, identify, are you a tenant with a lease today, yes or no? When does your current lease expire? 12 months, 24, 36, or greater than 36. If your situation is urgent, right? Where are we at for rents? If your lease is coming up for renewal, if the landlord has been aloof or unresponsive, then let's have that conversation and talk about strategy and how over the past 26 years, we've been able to work through that. Again, from that perspective, the urgencies, if you are interested in the complimentary lease review, please click yes. From that standpoint, we will follow up as quickly as possible to schedule a time all the way through the week or weekends as needed. We've extended hours to support all time zones. And again, do you plan to buy or start a practice within the next 24 months or expand? Please list yes or no. We'll give that another minute and I'll start covering on some of those questions. Again, for Q&A, feel free to add some as we go. There's also some questions that have come through the chat. So here's a question from a doctor. Hello, my lease is up for renewal. And on the original lease, my wife and I signed as personal guarantors, but now she has not wanted to sign the lease because she does not want to be a guarantor, right? I agree. The landlord does not accept that and says we'll cancel the lease. Can he do that? What are the options? So here's one from the West Coast, Washington. So great question. I would have to have a look at the lease specifically to see what's required. But obviously, you know, it also boils down to strategy. So part of the way that we've achieved success is by reaching out to the landlord and helping to explain the fact that we've been ideal tenants, we've paid rent on time, we've been great resources, we have fixed issues when they've cropped up, and it should be a very reasonable ask that we help to, right? They might not want to remove, but we can definitely limit. And we've worked out over 6 strategies over the past 26 years to limit that personal guarantee, including a burn down rate, meaning that there could be a specific amount of 50,000, and over the next few months as you make rent payments, then we're absolved of that liability. Or upon transferring of the lease is a very reasonable ask that we're no longer deemed personal guarantors. There's also different elements that can be held in escrow. There's a whole host of different step downs and creative language that we've done to help relieve your wife or yourself of personal guarantees while still making sure that the landlord knows that they're going to be made whole in the event of you defaulting or otherwise. So great question on that front on personal guarantees. Okay, so again, from here, we'll close the poll. Last but not least, again, happy to go through these question and answers. A whole flood just came through, so we'll certainly cover those now. Happy to stay on additional time. Please email us a copy of your lease, info@cirrusconsultinggroup.com. Strongly recommend scheduling a call with yourself, family, wife if she's personally guaranteed, children on a transition strategy. Very important that we're aware of the obligations, and the estate and your executor should also be aware as well of what the lease is and what obligations they may have. Again, heaven forbid if something were to happen to you or one of the dentists you work with. Okay, so moving forward to the next question now. So are more dentists selling their practices? Is there a higher percentage number of sales or closures of dental practices? So Dr. Zia, great question. In my experience, yes, a lot of people that were selling their practices are now still planning to sell their practices and sort of put things on hold as everything else has been on hold. But we're seeing a lot of deals close. We know a few of the groups we work with are closing at the end of the month, some at the end of next month. So deals are still happening and things are still moving forward. So yes, I believe that over the next few months, personally, there will be a lot of great opportunity. So for those of you on the line that are glass half full, that see this as an unbelievable opportunity to either move the practice and get out underneath, you know, a very difficult landlord, and to reset rents that should be about 8% of your revenue should go towards tenancy expense. If you're in the 20s, as we've seen some doctors throughout, you know, my old home state in California, right? We've seen some examples there. It might be a great time to take advantage of landlords and vacant spaces close by. Or a good opportunity to be expanding into those spaces, taking over leases. Yes, I can assure that doctors that were already winding themselves down to 1 or 2 days a week are not going to want to go back. It's, you know, look how hot is it working in a lab coat today. You know, for those that have been used to that, it's, you know, now with full PPE, it's going to be a challenge. So yes, I envision that there will be a transference from some doctors that are just not going to want to be a part of the dental community and looking to transition perhaps a little sooner than later. So that's key. Okay, so yes, so yeah, even in the case here that if your name is in the tenant, or sorry, if your corporation is the named tenant and not personal, you can still be and having that personal guarantee either as an exhibit at the end or built into the lease that states that yourselves, the individuals, are then personally guaranteeing the lease. So great question there. Now looking through, do you anticipate business to be slow through the rest of the year for dentistry? So in my personal opinion, yes, it's not going to come back in floods. There'll be, based on what we're seeing from different agencies, there is going to be a requirement to have separation between patients and different procedures and infectious control, you know, cleanings in between patients. So, you know, it's, many of you that I've talked to still have scheduled, you know, schedules filled through June and otherwise. So keeping in touch with your patients now is key. to if you're one of the many groups that are or individuals that are able to capitalize on this. But yes, I personally think that there'll be a decrease in some of the optional or cosmetic. I think that many people are going to come back, including myself, that delayed previous hygiene appointments. I'm going to be one of the first back in the chair. I see no issues in coming in and being chairside and being in the dental office. So I think that there'll be a surge and a catch up and a bit of a super cycle over time as we catch up. And my belief is, look, in the middle to long term, I believe that the dental profession and occupation is going to continue to stay strong. It's been, for the most part, recession proof, where people still need to get their teeth fixed. And general practices tend to do more of the work themselves and refer less. So the general practice tends to be a little more proof than some of the specialists. So that's my personal view as we go to phase 2, which is starting to reopen and starting to get back to some sense of the new normal. And then phase 3 is when we get back to being more of a bull market. As to timeline, your guess is as good as mine. Okay, some additional questions here. I have 2 practices, and if I want to sell one of them without the goodwill, meaning moving patients to the office, can the buyer get a loan for the office without the patients? Sure. So great question. The question is now on valuations and with or without goodwill. So yes, your practice is worth value, and especially if you're transitioning, while obviously you'll be getting less without the patient charts, but if I'm an associate and I can be able to enter into a practice that is, well equipped, you might steal a couple of your high producing money making chairs and moving them to your other location, but notwithstanding moving the money making chairs over, what an amazing opportunity for either a dental group or an individual to take over a turnkey practice and get that at a reduced rate. So yes, it's, while not as ideal, and the value of the charts is key, but it might be a great opportunity for someone that wants to move into that area. And of course, you can now, big advantage is you can choose your competitor. So let me state that again. So if you've got 2 practices, you're selling one and consolidating the other, you can now choose your competitor. You could choose a very, green associate versus a group as to whom you choose to transfer the lease to and assign the balance of that lease. So versus just walking away and letting the landlord choose, it might be to your benefit of helping to transfer that lease to the new buyer to take over your space. So great question there. Another one here. Our lease expired in April. Oh boy. We were not contacted by the landlord or management company, paid our rent through April and May, have extension options, but don't want to lock in right now, is this common. So Dr. Scott, definitely please take us up on the option to review your lease. It is a concern. I would look through the holdover provision of your lease. Specifically is if you are responsible, if you're in a month-to-month scenario, what obligation do you have? Meaning, the landlord may be able to increase your base rent by 150 or 200% and could also back bill you back to the month that you became in holdover or month-to-month status. So, I understand your concern about not wanting to lock in right now, but you should definitely be in communications. Not surprising the landlord has stuck their head in the sand, because that's beneficial for them, right? If you're month to month, they have complete control. If they're in conversations to sell the building because of their debt obligations, and the buyer or developer is looking at it and sees all these month-to-month leases, that's music to their ears, because they can come in, submit 30 days notices, and bulldoze and build a condo. So definitely, strongly would encourage you to take us up on the review. I'm happy to discuss personally and help to structure a scenario to make sure you have term. Right? Again, ask yourself, doctor, if the landlord tomorrow sent you a 30-day termination notice and you had to be out in 30 days, what impact would that have to your practice and to the value? So again, I understand that you don't want to lock in right now, and also your options. If you did not submit notice to exercise your options in writing, typically 6 or 12 months prior, those options are now null and void. So those are gone. We want to make sure now that you've got a strategy moving forward to help and make sure that you do have the ability to stay in the space and get back to work. Even in a short-term renewal is far better than leaving yourself exposed to that landlord with 30 days notice, right? No buyer is going to be able to get a loan from the bank if there's no predictability to stay in that space. I see a lot of emails coming in to info@. Again, feel free to continue to send through those leases, and happy to stay on to continue to go through some of these questions. These are great. Okay, Dr. Hassam, I'm moving to a new location within this year and already signed a lease and paid 2 months rent. Am I still able to renegotiate? That's difficult. So the short answer is no. It is very difficult. You know, you've just signed, you've just committed, and we're now, you know, contractually committed moving forward. So very difficult to renegotiate the lease at that point. There is still ability, depending on how the lease is structured. Maybe there's some flexibility in fixturing or free rents or something else through here, or asking for some deferrals or abatements, something to the fact that, you know, you've signed in just before the, you know, the falling knife. And I certainly feel for you. And I'd have to look through, again, did you sign a binding letter of intent? Have you fully executed the lease yet? Is there anything else that might give you an exit? Or is there a delay of the landlord in meeting some of their obligations? Did you have anyone professionally representing you in the lease negotiations? So lots of questions there. Again, Hassan, please feel free to email us and schedule that review. So here's another one. Satar, can I cancel the lease if I am unable to remodel my space to comply with new rules, regulations, etc.? So unfortunately, the short answer is typically no, and it does depend on how the lease is structured. Do you have, or did you have anyone help you to negotiate termination rights or an early exit or otherwise? Is there anything in your lease today that would allow for it? If not, and you just signed whatever the landlord proposed, then unfortunately the landlord typically would not put that in. So, excuse me, no, not very easy, or not able to cancel the lease if you're unable to remodel the space because you've contractually committed to it. And if there's not a clause that states that, you know, if there's a requirement and we're not able to stay in business, right, or we lose our license or something like that, if that's not included, then that's a major red flag, and no, we cannot. Another question here. My landlord is selling the building, and most probably the new buyer will demolish it. I'm month to month now. What should I do? So, oh boy, definitely, Joseph, please reach out immediately afterwards. That is just about as bad as it gets. I'm not trying to be alarmist, but, you know, obviously, look, better to negotiate with the devil we know than the devil we don't know. And don't leave yourself exposed on a month-to-month lease, because we're now completely at the whim of the new landlord. So, and if it's a new developer and they want to demolish it, then that's a big problem. What do we do with demolition clauses? Typically, we're very successful in adding some sort of a blackout period or deferral, or extend the notification period. We've just done a few in some of the major centers to add a payback period, that if the landlord in the next 5 years demolishes the practice or demolishes the building, they have to pay a certain amount to help relocate the building to the surrounding area or to one of their other buildings. So there's lots of ways we can structure the demolition clause. But again, if the landlord's selling the building and then probably the new buyer is demolishing it and you're month to month, that is a big problem. Please reach out. In addition to that, can I cancel my office lease if I can't remove? We touched on that. Can we use an office's potential strategic bankruptcy or closure as leverage to negotiating the lease? You know, I certainly won't comment on the bankruptcy side. That typically does trigger default. So again, from a leverage side, no. In my experience, that doesn't. But you know, bankruptcy is a whole other kettle of fish that I certainly won't comment on. The strategy is now, long before we get to that point, how do we help to structure things moving forward to help create a win-win scenario with the landlord? They don't want to see you go bankrupt. They don't want to see issues. They don't want to lose tenants. They want to craft something no different than the government, to help structure something that gets us back to normal and gets us through this, short-term crunch. Okay, a few other ones here. I have not paid for the rent for April or May, but I sent a letter to the landlord to propose a decrease in payment of lease rent for April and May and June, and have not heard an answer. What should I do? So, Jacqueline, that is a concern because, technically we are now, depending on your lease, we're in a default situation, and that is a problem. So again, the guidance is if we can pay rent, we should. And the question is, what has been done? We've been hired by dozens of doctors to deal with these type of scenarios. It depends on your situation. If you have leverage and your lease is coming up for renewal, then that helps to put you to the top of the priority list. And again, the landlord doesn't have to agree to any of these things. So, you are the one that is putting yourself and the practice at risk by not paying rent. So best, especially as PPP loans or others are coming in, get the proper advice from your financial counselors and otherwise, and make those payments as much as you can, because obviously that puts you in a worse leverage for negotiations, and also could come back and bite you down the road if the landlord does, hold you in default or otherwise. Okay, so we've got some time for a few extra questions. I still see, well over 100 doctors still on the line. Let me know if there's additional questions. And so through the chat, or certainly through the scenario. Again, those of you that are month to month, please note urgent, and we'll prioritize those today to get back in touch with you and to help protect yourself moving forward. Okay. All right, so some other questions that just came in. My lease is being renewed in 14 months. Should I pay rents in the full based on the proposal? So yeah, so Jacqueline, that changes everything. So if your lease is coming due soon, the next question is when is your option to renew deadline? Do you have the ability to stay in the space after 14 months? If so, it might be a 12-month notification period, which means that technically we should be renegotiating the lease now, long before you hit that option to renew deadline. That gives you the most leverage. So if it's 14 months, the best way to cut through the landlord's BS, pardon my French, is to draft a proposal, is what we're doing all day with our clients, drafting a proposal to the landlord to say, look, I need some short-term help. I need to make sure that me skipping April and May is not going to cause me or being held in default. And I want to draft a proposal outlining the terms and conditions to have me renew my lease and help to reset financial rates. That should be music to the landlord's ears, and will get you from being, hey, I'm just asking for something free, to now saying, no, I'm here to restructure my lease in alignment to the goals of the practice and the goals of the business, and therefore I want to submit and renegotiate a new long-term lease. That should hopefully get them off their keisters, and now we're hitting them in the wallet, right? If they're able to secure a new long-term lease, then they can go to the bank, they can go with otherwise to say, look, here's the revenue that we now have contractually committed for the next 5 or 10 years. That gives them leverage and helps them, and also, again, dramatically helps you. So again, Jacqueline, you are in a fantastic situation to be renegotiating, and instead of playing the defensive role and waiting for the landlord to wake up, let's start being proactive. Let's hit him in the wallet. Let's propose a new 10-year term with 2 5-year options, and let's make sure that we're dramatically updating the lease so that it protects you, and also a good opportunity to minimize or limiting some of your guarantees or some of the alterations language, or maybe even getting some tenant improvement allowance, some money specifically for the landlord in conjunction of what you need to reopen and improve the space. So great question. Thank you for that, Jacqueline. Please make sure at the end or email us a copy of the lease, and happy to help out. Okay, lots of other chats here that just came through. So another question here. Can a dentist move out of his office and terminate rental obligations based on the requirements and regulations in place post-COVID due to inability to remodel the space? So I think that was similar to the other question posted there. From that perspective, again, depends on the lease, but principally no. Unless there's a section that allows some sort of a language that if there's new government requirements, and if we can't, I mean, how do you define can't is again unique. So principally no, unfortunately. But to the positive, we may be able, just like we did with Dr. Sam Thatcher, dentist for the San Francisco Giants. He gave us a great video testimonial and review recently. We were able to get him almost $10,000 of tenant improvement allowance just for renewing his lease. So don't underestimate the landlord's ability to potentially help and to negotiate something to help to make sure that you get through this. Feel free to reach out to the line here that routes through to my associate, who will help to schedule a call with myself or one of our senior consultants on the team. Another question here, my landlord and I are waiting for the CECRA. I have not paid the April and May rent. Is that default? So short answer is potentially, and most likely, especially if the landlord has not agreed to anything in writing. So in those cases, you've now got some uncertainty. So yes, we're waiting on CECRA, which is the federal incentive in Canada to add a benefit to the landlords, which is designed around tenants, but it's principally money to landlords, which is very important that it's structured and negotiated and there's a proper lease amendment that ensures that the landlord are passing on those funds and not just bolstering their own bank accounts. So, but yes, depending on your situation, Pupak, definitely please ensure that we're happy to review the lease. Make sure that you are getting a properly negotiated and drafted amendment to your lease so that this isn't something that can bite you down the line. And if you can, I would still suggest making April and May. It doesn't preclude you from renegotiating June or July, but it'll help to make sure that of all the different tenants, you're still showing that you're meeting your obligations. Okay, I think we've got a couple of other Q&As. We'll keep it open for another minute or so. Again, happy to go a little extra time for today. Appreciate well over 100 doctors still on the line. Let me know if you have any additional questions. I'll keep the lines open here for another few minutes. Some other questions popping up here. In terms of Cirrus and how we help. So yes, the complimentary lease review, there's no cost or commitment for that, just an opportunity to schedule a call, review the lease, and if nothing else, help to make sure you're aware of what the current obligations are. So there's a few ways to request that. Number one, on the screen in front of you, you can call or email your lease to info@cirrusconsultinggroup.com. There's a poll, if you filled that out already. And also when you close, there will be redirected to one of the specific forms, so you have the ability to request it through there as well. So yeah, multiple ways to request a complimentary review. And again, if it's pressing, feel free to call the number through here, and happy to assist. My personal extension is 3255. Okay. Any final questions from those on the line? Again, for those that are in the scenario now that are responsible for rental payments, and if they are on a month-to-month basis, very, very important that we do structure things accordingly and make sure that you are not leaving yourselves exposed. Great, perfect. On that note, we're about 1:30. We appreciate everyone's time. We'll continue to do these. We'll continue to add new content and updates, and happy to assist and support. And we appreciate everyone's time. God bless. Look after yourself and your family, and also your business as well. Happy to assist in any way. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time, and good luck with the reopening, and looking forward to helping be that steady hand as our firm has for the past 26 years. happy to assist in any way. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day.